I'm Max Hanlon. I'm a theologian who loves art.
I'm Tessa Davidson. I'm an artist who loves theology.
And this is Our First Word.
Theology of beauty.
Tess, I have a question for you.
What's that?
The Venus de Milo, is it pornography?
No.
Okay. Marilyn Monroe did a nude photo shoot, and Hugh Hefner bought it without her permission, by the way, and put it in the first issue of Playboy. And was that pornography?
Well, I've not seen the image, but just based on the way that it's set up, I would say, yes, it is.
Okay. What's the difference?
This gets tricky to nail it down into a definitive black and white, concrete definition, but I would say a lot of this lies in the intent to arouse and the framework in which it is meaning to arouse the viewer and to reduce the human body into something that should be consumed and objectified.
So it's about the intent of the artist, the intent of the person or the producer, maybe in this case, not the photographer who took the images, but Hugh Hefner who put them out as an object of sexual desire or put them out in order to titillate and stimulate desire and such. You're saying that pornography is about what was intended by the person who made it or about the person who distributed it?
I think that there definitely is a part of it that's based on the intention of the one that's framing it up and creating it. But I've also worked with students where they depict the human body in a certain way and they don't mean to intend it to be arousing, but their cultural influences are such that they're not even aware of how that has influenced them, and they are portraying the human body in a way that is pornographic. And so I think the intent certainly is a part of it, but also even not having the intent, but still being influenced by the cultural forces that have that intention there.
And so does the audience have a role in this? Like imagine the Venus de Milo, this famous nude sculpture. Imagine that people go to see it not because it's classically beautiful, not because it's this important piece of history, not because it's even like a great example of art, but people are like, oh, it's so hot. And they just go and leer at it in this way. Is it now pornography if it's being used that way?
It then becomes to that person, the lust is then in their heart. I mean, Christ even says this, if you look at a woman to lust, and then it's in your own heart as well. So I think, people can take something that is the human body and beautiful and made in God's, that's glorifying to God, and they can take it and distort it and lust after, and then it becomes pornographic. It becomes just like a host of that evil distortion. But then I would not say the fault lies on the statue. It lies within the heart of the person.
So so in this sense, there's really not, pornography is not something, like on this piece, it's not something that's out there. It's rather a way of seeing.
Yes.
So that's it. But that's an interesting sort of thing because if there were art that was created to be pornographic, it was distributed as pornographic, it was treated as pornographic by its original audience, and then later on we pick it up and we go, I'm not looking at this as pornography, I'm looking at this as art, and I see all these things that they didn't see, and I just find it to be this, beautiful thing or whatever. Does it suddenly, now it's not pornography?
Right. Yeah, you're kind of putting your finger on where it seems to be squishy and there's not a definitive line. Kind of like it reminds me of how I struggled with the passage that when Paul spoke out, I won't eat meat in this context, but then I can see how it would be wrong in this context. And it's like sometimes we want to have things very black and white and clear and definitive for all situations, but then it's hard because it's messy and you need wisdom and it's situational and it's context bound. And so I could say, yes, something could be pornographic for some, but then not for others. And it's difficult.
There's this famous Supreme Court case, and Justice Stewart says famously, and when asked about whether something is pornography, he says, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
I know it when I see it. Yes, right? I have heard that. Yeah.
And I think that when I hear that anyway, there are two things that occur to me. One is that sounds pretty smart, and one is that sounds utterly unpersuasive, right? Oh, so you know it when you see it. This just feels like a power play. I can imagine Foucault saying, "Oh, you just all
judge.
you mean is I have the power because I'm in this position. Therefore, I get to dictate what it is." But there's really nothing about itself. It's not like naming blue versus red, and we can point to some empirical, measurable thing like the height of a light wave or something. I think that Foucault would say when he says, "I know it when I see it," that's pornography. All he means is I don't like it and have the power to suppress it. And I think there's something right in Foucault's Foucault didn't actually comment on this that I'm aware of, but that approach, there's something right in that in saying, don't imagine that you can actually clearly and definitively name what this is. This is the squishy thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it seems willfully naive to imagine that there's no such thing as pornography.
Right. Obviously, yeah, there are certain markers that indicate, okay, this is being set up in such a way as to put less of the emphasis on the human person and the dignified, nude body versus looking at certain parts of the body and setting up a focal point in such a way and certain poses and types of ways in which we see out in culture that are being used to manipulate a certain audience.
Scruton talks about in his chapter on art and Arouse, which I think is really excellent in his book, Beauty, A Very Short Introduction. He talks about art, portraits in this case, in which the subject is not nude, but rather is unclothed.
Right.
And I thought that was such an interesting insight. The idea was, we've taken this person's clothes off, as opposed to this person is nude. Which reminded me, when I first heard that, I remember a C.S. Lewis quote where he's talking about the distinctions of our body are highlighted in our clothes. And he says, any man that's been in the sauna knows that pretty soon everybody looks alike, which I don't think is true exactly, but I get what he's saying. But there is something different about the unembarrassed nude versus the unclothed person. And this gets, I think, your point about cultural phenomenon. The difference in someone's wearing a bikini at the beach or a pool or something versus someone's wearing a bra and panties. This is essentially the same coverage, maybe even, but we encounter seeing those two people. We see a person in their underwear, maybe in their house or something. You're not supposed to see this, as opposed to, no, this is what you're supposed to wear. We're swimming, that kind of thing. Or it doesn't have to be a woman, by the way, either. A man wearing boxer shorts, a man wearing swim trunks. This is essentially the same visual, but culture determines, that's underwear, that's unclothed, that's a swimming suit. I mean, like we said, that's the suit he's supposed to wear, his clothing. So it seems like culture dictates a lot of this too, and not just big cultural moves like you can show your ankles, but you can't show your breasts or something like that, which is that's a cultural marker for us. But certainly if we went back in other cultures, other times, they would say, these people walking around with their ankles uncovered. But there's also within culture even more complexity. In this context, this is pornographic or sexual or whatever. In this context, it's not. Think about nudes in a medical journal, right, where we're looking at the body in order to do medicine on it, versus nudes in a pornographic website or magazine versus nudes in art. I'm just thinking about all the different ways that we view the body, and the context makes this enormous difference in it. So let's talk about what's going on. I mean, for the last few weeks, we've been talking about threats to beauty, and we talked about the threat of vanity, and now, pornography is an actual threat. It's a way of distorting beauty. The nature of pornography is that it catches people's attention, right? That's its whole point, is to grab and hold attention, and using sexual desire as a lever to do that. But beauty grabs our attention too. So it feels like this distortion or this bastardization of art and beauty into something that comes from it or is related to it, but isn't it? So what's the difference in terms of intent between the sculptor of the Venus de Milo, I don't know who this is, of course, but someone who's trying to depict the nude human body, let's say. I'm trying to think of a sort of extreme example here. We could think of other things to be pornographic besides just nude bodies, but a nude portrait or sculpture or something that is being displayed for the purpose of beauty and to glory in the body rather than to excite lust or excite sexual appetite in the viewer. What are the differences? What are the things you can point to? You're trying to teach your art students about this.
Yeah. And it's just so hard as a woman to be entering this conversation just because I get sensitive thinking about just so much of the damage and the hurt and the pain that, especially with this generation, our access to images and the internet and these porn sites, and just how that is just messed up and just has captivated and taken hold and, really created all of this bondage that have had just decades of wreckage in marriages and in individuals and their view of women and their view of men. And it's created so much damage. And so there's so much attached to this sensitive conversation.
Dangerous.
And I know that people maybe hearing this have been just hurt so much by the use of pornography and how that enslaves individuals and the need to find freedom and all of that. And so there is a clear marker of difference between the individual that is enslaved to this addiction and how it's been set up through the luring of beautiful, or I don't even want to attach the word beautiful.
Yeah, that
it's
seems
more
to me
of that's no, if God is beauty, no, he has nothing to do with this. This is us using appealing to the senses and trying to create a sensation that delights, but then completely imprisons and cuts off something from its context. I truly believe that the word beautiful is attached to a context, and it is a reflection of God and the divine. And this distortion that we see in pornography is nothing to do with, it might be coming through visual stimulation in a way that beauty does as well, but it is coming at it through trying to take and enslave and cut off something from its context. So we don't have fittingness. We don't have the context of the situation. We extract the parts that we want, and then we hit that desire button again and again, and it objectifies that individual. And so, I'm sorry, I'm talking all around this question, but I just feel when thinking about this, there's all of these things that this opens up.
I think it's right to have, like you said, there's a lot of bottled up, hey, I've got something to say about this because it is really dangerous, it is really bad and so forth. I want to pick up on a couple of things you said there and press on talk about. One was there's no fittingness, and the other was that there's an objectification. Fittingness is one that's interesting because there's a sense in which they can have proper balance in the presentation and so forth. There's all sort of things you can do. The thing that seems it's not fitting is it's not the image that is the problem. It's the audience interacting with it. That is, it's not that there's something not fitting about the actual, depiction, but rather the thing that doesn't fit, that doesn't belong is the viewer ought not be seeing this, the voyeuristic character of it, right? This is one reason that oftentimes I think voyeurism is a key aspect of pornography. You're seeing the thing that you ought not see, or that the person that you're looking at or the image that you're looking at, they don't see you. And this seems to me to be a real distortion of what beauty is supposed to do. Beauty is supposed to draw us into itself and open itself to us, as opposed to hiding and we kind of are peeking, through the window or something to see something that we shouldn't see. Hence a lot of the appeal, I think, that pornography has. Whether we're talking about, when I say pornography, we think about these awful websites or things like this, but also we certainly know that there can be pornography that doesn't show much at all. It's about the presentation. And some of the thing that's being pushed on is the transgressive nature of it. Here's a chance to do a little something you're not supposed to do. Here's a way to be a little bit bad, all that kind of stuff. That to me is key to distinguishing it from beauty. Whereas with beautiful things, you are precisely supposed to be looking at. You are invited to see this. It's on display to say, no, look, here it is. As opposed to, I'm looking at it, but there's a sense in which I'm not supposed to. What do you, when you that's one piece of the fitting conversation. When you talk about fittingness in particular, what's not fitting in pornography? And I'm saying, let's imagine that you've got like this pornographic image and everything about it looks right. But instead of, like the design of it is correct.
Okay, sorry.
Right?
I think I'm.
So
yeah.
when I'm saying what's not fitting is, I'm not supposed to be looking at this. That's part of what makes it pornography, the voyeuristic nature of it.
Right. And this is where, when we were talking about kitsch earlier and its relationship with beauty, we talked about how beauty can't be detached from its siblings, truth and goodness. And so whenever you detach that then is a distortion of the beautiful. And I think in this conversation, we see a detachment of truth and goodness when you're talking about the pornographic image. And so this is where, again, it might have the visual design and principles of design and all of that appeal, but you're detaching it from the good. You're detaching it from the truth of the individual and the holistic nature that we are not just bodies. We are bodies and spirit, and we cannot have this detachment of just looking at us as flesh. And so I think in terms of fittingness, you see that distortion, but you also see a distortion of when you set something up in a sexual way, you are bringing up the conversation of the sexual union. And anytime you have a sexual union, for that to be fitting, it's in the confines of this open relationship between male and female in the context of marriage. Like, that's what it was all designed for. And so when you strip away that context and it's just about the sexual appeal of this body and in this flesh, like, that's stripping away all of the fittingness of what all of that was designed for. So yeah, just on so many levels, it's taking away context. It's taking away the proper place of the role of this. So.
I think a lot of us would quickly think, I like how you said the siblings of goodness and truth with beauty. We're like, oh, look, it's taking the goodness away. And that seems like kind of almost implicit in the definition. Pornography by its definition is bad, not good. But I also think that it's relevant that the truth is something that's stripped away. So one of the things that's so wrong with pornography is that it tells a lie. So the person in the image, the woman, looks out at the viewer with a look that says, I want you, or I'm on offer for you. But she doesn't want you.
Right.
She doesn't know you.
Exactly. And you don't know her.
Exactly. You are an intruder into this space. So there's a deception here. Or even if it's a depiction of, the image, these people in the images are looking at each other engaged in a sexual act, acting like they want each other. The role of pornography is to invite the viewer to say, pretend that's you. Or pretend you're a voyeur. In either case, that's not what's going on. There's this deception. The art lies to us in this way. I'm also interested in the other piece of this, because they seem to be tightly related, where you said that it objectifies people. That same chapter in Scruton, he's talking about this French artist Boucher, and he says the bodies, he has all these nudes that he decorates, the king, Louis XV's court with. And the bodies are all very similar. They're all kind of the like idealized sexual woman of that era. But the face, he said, it's the same face on all of them. But it's not a portrait. There's not somebody that posed for this. It's an ideal nose and an ideal eyes and an ideal chin. And they're all sort of cobbled together to create this fake face, such that Scruton says, there's no soul in these. It's very different from, say, like a portrait that aims at saying, I want you to see this person. And these Boucher pieces, technically well done, I think Scruton says they are mere decoration, not art. Because all they're meant to do is convey a sense of sexuality, not to do what they pretend to do, namely show you a person. I think this is when I'm thinking about, like, pragmatically, when I've tried to work with people or to think about how do we overcome or resist pornography. Just saying that's a bad thing, don't do that, don't look at that, I find is not usually very helpful. Everybody knows that already. The thing that is more helpful is to learn to say, that is somebody's sister.
Yeah.
That is somebody's daughter. That person was given drugs or needed money badly, and so they did this. What you're watching is a lie. I think the Me Too movement was really powerful in exposing that.
Yeah.
Right? These women telling their stories and saying, yeah, not only was I abused, but like even sometimes in filming, these things that look sexy or look hot or whatever on film, I was nauseous because of all this. I remember like reading some of those Me Too stories and thinking, this is how we get people to stop like wanting this, is to recognize the humanity in these people. Whereas whether it's in the real world, like just lusting after some actual human being, or it's in the art world and we're talking about lusting after an image as opposed to appreciating its beauty, a huge piece of the danger is that some human being or some idea or image of a human being is reduced from the complex wholeness that is a person down to an object to be desired, possessed, to have. We talk about eros and beauty. There's something really right about how beauty, we talked about in the Trinity discussion, how beauty both opens itself and invites us into it. And there's this kind of sexual element to it. I think that's right.
Yeah, and I think Song of Solomon would affirm that.
Absolutely. But only when it's, real people really seeing, really loving, really opening themselves to each other, not two people using each other.
Right.
And that's Kant's language, to
Yeah.
treat people as ends and not as means. Don't use people, but not two people who are mutually agreeing to use each other for their own pleasure or excitement. Even the mutuality is not sufficient.
Yeah,
It has to be more than that. And I think this is one of the dangers that we're like, how art or how beauty can go wrong, is it's pretty subtle to be able to say, here's what shifts from this piece of art, from Song of Solomon as erotic literature, right, to, I don't know, just erotica that what somebody reads on the internet. Well, what's the difference? I think that we end up with a kind of a I know it when I see it answer. We can't always specify exactly what it is, but we can start talking about things like, is this celebrating goodness? Is this telling the truth? Is this calling us to some sort of wholeness that values and appreciates and elevates whole persons as images of God? Or is this merely reducing somebody to a thing, an object that I can use?
Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad you highlight all of those aspects. And for me, as an artist and as a art historian, I get frustrated when I hear two different or I see two different things. On one hand, our concern with pornography and how the body has been distorted and used and manipulated for sexual gains and that kind of thing. Then we have put a frustration on the human body, and we've denigrated the human body as God's creation, and it has to be. It's something that if it's ever shown, it's covered up, and we realize that Jesus had a body. Like God made our bodies. Our bodies are not wrong,
They're
and
not
our bodies
dirty.
yes. But the way we talk about covering them up, and sometimes even when in discussions about what we should wear and things like that, the message that we've communicated to our children is sometimes that your body is bad, and that is not God glorifying. And the idea of us being in heaven nude or something like that would make some people like, what? I can't even imagine, Adam and Eve in the garden and being unclothed and that not being wrong, because there's just something that makes us within Christian conversation feel like the body is bad. And that's what I think needs to be critiqued. The fact that we have that view of the body, we need a stronger theology of the body, knowing that it's good. And so when we see portrayals of the human body that are not portrayed in a way that is sexualizing, and that it is not portrayed in a way that is intended to arouse. When we look at paintings of the Sistine Chapel ceiling, those are images that are not intended for arousal, nor would any individual look at the David and say, oh, look at what's Michelangelo is trying to do here, because that's not a situation in which we see that. So on one hand, I think there needs to be a critique with some of the language we see within the church around the human body. But on the other hand, I also see how art has been hijacked in a way by people that are used to the distortions within pornography. Because what I'm seeing as a figural painter is that artists that are portraying the human body they have been influenced by this pornography epidemic, and we're starting to see that the human body is being portrayed in a very pornographic way within art. I mean, even like thinking about like scenes from the movie of Titanic. Obviously, that was like a very like sexual situation, and she's like, "Paint me in only this," and that kind of thing.
Draw me like one of your French
and it's like
girls and
it's
all.
like combining art and beauty with this more sexualized fantasy pornographic scenario, and that's where the two being conflated in modernity has really like messed up the beauty of the human body in art. And so it's frustrating to see distortions on both sides.
So I want to ask this as just a practical matter. I mean, I think lots of what we're talking about these are ideas or abstractions and things. When I went to Greece, I took my daughter and we were going around. She was maybe like, I don't know, 10 or 11, I forget. A little girl, though, maybe even younger than that. Anyway, we're walking around, we're seeing all these statues, and paintings and such. And she was, now these are mostly males.
Yeah. Right.
But she was, by the end, she was like, ugh, I'm tired of seeing naked people all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And then I remember we went to the Louvre, Jenny and I went to the Louvre, and she, at the end, she was like, I would like to see some paintings without breasts.
Yeah.
Just like it felt, this just, there's too much or whatever.
Right.
And we had a discussion like, if most of the painters in this Renaissance period and things, if most of the painters featured in these classic museums and most of the sculptures, if they hadn't been done by men, how would they have been different? And we had that kind of conversation, just
that's
wondering
a
about
really
it.
interesting question. To open
So
up.
what do you say to students who are on an overseas program, they're going to museums, and one of the things you do find is that some form of unclothedness, right? And frequently sexual art as well. What advice do you have from when they're walking through for how to think well, how to navigate well this phenomenon that huge swaths of art does involve the naked body? Some of it's pornographic, some of it's not.
Yeah.
How is a 19-year-old supposed to navigate this?
And what an opportunity to practice discernment and thinking about how a situation can be set up in a way to shoot you one way or the other. Because what we see throughout all of history, and you look at other cultures, there is a completely different view of the human body. Our time is so unique in how we view even like breastfeeding children. If you go to any other country, my husband, when he went to Peru, women would just pull down their shirts and feed their toddlers. And it was just a part of life when you navigate all these other cultures. And historically, Jesus and his disciples, they would have fished in the nude. Like he would have been hanging on the cross nude. Like the human body nude is not a bad thing, or like it was used to promote shame because that was not an honorable, on the cross that was actually used as a way to show shame, but not being sexualized. And so we always see the new body and we equate it with being sexualized. And so recognizing that other cultures throughout all of history and almost all traditional cultures, they do not equate nudity with sexualization. So I think like going into those situations, noting that, and also like looking for how, especially the last few hundred years, scenarios has shifted in how they set up the human figure in art, and to be kind of calling it out when you see the body being presented in a way that is to invite lust. And so I think it would be good going into those scenarios, kind of looking for the difference in those scenarios.
It's an interesting thing to me that the context makes such a difference.
Yeah.
Like you said, in this culture, topless women, this is not a thing. It's not sexualized. We're just working, and it's hot or whatever, that kind of thing. It also reminds me of the difference that happens when you have privacy that is an option in the modern world in a way that it was not in the ancient world. Remember this excellent article about the invention of privacy.
Yeah, that's
You have to have a certain level of affluence and technology to have a house with 2 rooms, right? And so big families, Roman toilets. You can go and see Roman toilets.
There's like 40 of them.
There are no stalls. There's no no door to shut. And it's just on the street. You walk by and, oh, look, there's somebody. And it was just more open. I don't want to be the person who says, oh, that's the right way to do. The pure natural way of humans is to just be open and naked all the time.
Right.
None of that. But nor do I think that the idea of, look, we ought to constantly be clothed and cover everything up is the right way either. And so it's trying to figure out I love your language of discernment. How do we say, I'm looking for art that celebrates beauty rather than objectifying people? For art that calls me to contemplate something that is transcendent rather than lowers my mind to something that is earthy and passing. How do I think about art in a way that reveals the truth, especially the truth about a person, rather than tells me a lie about them? They exist merely for my own pleasure. And if we can avoid those things, then I think that we get at this beauty of art without falling into the danger of it simply becoming pornography.